Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. We are excited every week to bring you stories of service around the world. We're part of Rotary International. Rotary is 1.2 million people in 34,000 clubs around the world dedicated to making their communities better in small and grand ways. So what we do as a club in our asynchronous online club is to try to find ways to inspire people to see new possibilities for themselves. And to that end, we look for the coolest possible speakers we can find who have wonderful stories to share. Hopefully the kinds of thing that'll be in your head all the way through the week and allow you to say, oh, wow, I was watching this thing on this Rotary Club right? And see those conversations that will inspire others to do service wherever they might. Today's speaker is Bud MacKenzie. Bud is a person I got to know several years back. He and I began talking about some of the work he's been doing. He has been to Afghanistan many times. You might say, well, how many is many? Over
20.
20. And in doing that, he has worked to create opportunities for kids there, help out with the development of schools and learning centers there. And his story is an inspiring one. It's also one that has led him to see new possibilities for what he does here. And so his talk today is called From Narcissism to Compassion, and it is a pleasure, Bud, to have you with us today. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be able to speak to people all over the world. The number one question that I'm asked is, MacKenzie, what the heck are you doing in Afghanistan? It all started in 2003 when I read about Greg Mortensen, who was building schools in Afghanistan. And I called him, and after an hour's worth of due diligence, I said to him, how much money do you need to build another school in Afghanistan? And he told me $25,000. So I essentially said, go pick another village. I live in a city where we spent $1.5 million fixing up Little League fields. And so I called the handful of friends you can rely on and said, we need to raise $25,000 to build a school in Afghanistan. 6 months later, we had raised $60,000, sent it all to him. And then in 2005, I went to see the school when it was finished. And that visit proved to be life-altering for me. I had no intention of doing anything more than raising money to build one school in Afghanistan. But when I got there, I by then knew about the conditions that were in Afghanistan, but I was seeing them firsthand. And I also knew about US involvement in Afghanistan. And the inescapable conclusion about the conditions in Afghanistan is that we played a major role in the conditions that exist today. So, formed a nonprofit organization called Trust in Education. It's a grassroots organization, people to people. When I go to Afghanistan, I'm not military, I'm not government, I'm not in the business of providing aid to Afghanistan. I just represent a bunch of people in the United States who care about them. So there's the first school, and that was built through Greg Mortensen. I took that to an elementary school and showed the photos to some kids. I've been showing photos to donors for a month. One kid took a look at that photograph and said to me, Bud, where are the swings? They're not there. So the next time I went back, put in the swings, you put in the monkey bars, you put in the seesaw, and you know what happens? More kids go to school because school is a fun place to be. What's this? I learned very soon that the Russians, when they were in Afghanistan and they were firing rockets from this village of this small village, Lalandar, is the Russians would come out and destroy the aqueduct systems. If you really wanted to punish farmers, you destroy their aqueduct systems. So they had lost all of their trees were gone, they died. So these are actually fruit trees, most of them apricot trees. We provided 22,000 of those trees to that village and the farmers in that area. That's the trees today, 15 years later. These are apricots coming from those trees. So basically what that did is restore to them the commerce that they once had in growing fruit. This represents a law firm calling me about 5 or 6 years ago saying, we're upgrading our computers. Do you need any computers? I said, sure. They ended up having 125 computers to share, and they gave them to us. There's a program called the Denton program where you can ship humanitarian aid for free, and I'll tell you about that later, but those computers ended up. So all of a sudden we were over in Afghanistan providing computers to school and establishing computer classes. That then led to this. See the lower right-hand corner and see the math? We now have 10 computer libraries. And by that, I mean these are rooms that have computers like these that are loaded with educational software. In the lower right-hand corner, what you'll see is one of 1,000 Khan Academy math videos. And it took us 2 years, but we translated 1,000 math videos into Dari. So now the kids can go into these libraries and they can study on their own time and learn at their own pace. We have 700 kids a day who are using these 10 libraries. This is a classroom for girls in the village of Farzah. And a young Afghan woman approached me several years ago and said, they have schools for boys, they don't have one for girls. We went through a fundraising process, and this is where the girls are today. This increased the enrollment of the girls in classes, which were being taught inside homes, from 250 to 375, just as soon as the school was completed. What's this represent? Fire. Smoke inhalation is responsible for 2 million deaths a year. Someone who had come to one of my speaking engagements came up to me and said, do you know anything about solar? All I knew is there's sun, it emits heat. He then convinced us to get involved in making solar cookers. We ended up providing 6,000 solar cookers into refugee camps into Kabul. And we didn't just give them to them and say, good luck with the sun. We had training courses. But 6,000 solar cookers means 3,000 families got 2 of them. And when you figure the average Afghan family has 10 people, that's 30,000 people now that know how to cook with solar and can. What's this? I told you about the ability to make a shipment through the Denton program for free. So we have a packing party for Afghanistan every year right around in September. If there's one thing we have in this country, we've got stuff. Stuff we no longer need. We have probably shipped over 100,000 pounds of the things that people no longer need that bring to these packing parties. And this is one of them. This is a distribution of this stuff in Afghanistan, and I'm taking this film.
Yeah, that's better now. Yeah, I like that better. That's great.
That's my friend Nabi, who goes with me to Afghanistan.
It's going to be a long winter. No, she said it's enough. It's enough? She's got enough to get through the winter?
I find that incredible. Here's a young girl. A boy comes up. She pushes him away. Nabi asks her if that's enough. She says, no, it's not enough. Fills it up and marches off to the bus. We actually would transport families from the refugee camps to where we had an office so that we wouldn't arrive and then everybody would run to the truck. What's this? This is, of course, begging on the streets of Kabul. This is a young girl shining shoes on the streets of Kabul. She's shining shoes no more. About 9 years ago, we started a program to rescue basically children off the street, a sponsorship program in which individual families or schools sponsor specific children to get off the school and go to school. The practical problem for many families is that their children make more money on the streets than their parents do. We have had 140 children sponsored through this program now. We have 16 college graduates. We have 14 in college now. And this young gentleman here 9 years ago, this was him. And when Navi and I were in Afghanistan, we didn't think he was going to make it. This is him today. He's a lawyer in Afghanistan now, all because he was receiving $50 a month from his sponsor for the past 9 years. This is one school in Lafayette, an elementary school, and I used to have drives that were called Change for Change drives. But I realized what was happening with those drives. If I'd go give a talk, they'd be all inspired, and they'd just go home and grab some change and hit up people for change, throw it in the jar and be done with it. So I decided to change the motto of the fundraising to "The buck stops here," which is a double entendre. One suggesting that we should put in more than just the pennies, the dimes, and the quarters. And the other was take personal responsibility for what ends up in the jar. So the fundraising for the last 6 or 7 years has been earn it. You cannot put anything in the jar that you didn't earn yourself. I didn't know how this would go, but it's turned out to be a fantastic way to raise money because they earn it themselves and they own the results. And their parents love it too, because now they're doing chores, they're washing cars, just as this gentleman has. So that basically is what the kids are now doing in schools. Now that's the end of my discussion about Afghanistan, but I want to talk to you about the other thing that I'm now sort of the latest cause. A couple of years ago, somebody asked me to create a course for teachers that would be offered online through Dominican College. I now have two. The first is reversing the trend from narcissism to compassion. The second is including the excluded. How do we deal with the children that are being excluded on campus? I ended up focusing on narcissism in part because there's a University of Pennsylvania study that over a 10-year period in interviewing 14,000 incoming freshmen concluded that narcissism in our country had risen by 100%, empathy had declined by 40%. And if we're raising narcissistic children, more and more narcissistic children in this country, we're doing them a disservice. Because the one thing I realized in my work in Afghanistan is that prior to 2003, I was a lawyer. I did deals for businesses, buy a business, sell a business, form a corporation, manage money. Once I formed a nonprofit organization, what I discovered was I was surrounded by volunteers, givers, who expect nothing in return, ask for nothing. They're just running around looking for ways in which they can help others. And you know what I discovered? They're happier. Givers are happier, and they lead more fulfilling lives. So then what that happened is I created these courses and I began to discover in my school, unlike Denmark, and I'll talk about Denmark in a minute, because I'm talking about Denmark primarily because they rate countries by how happy their people are. And Denmark's number one or number two every single year for the past 15 years. You have to ask yourself, why are these people so darn happy? They have the highest tax rate in the world. Why are they so happy? Our happiness rating in the United States is falling from 3rd, we're down to 16th, and it fell two positions last year. And I think it's the difference between weism and meism. That's the basic difference between the two. Let me give you some examples in Denmark, for example, in terms of weism. First of all, you have free medical care. Second of all, the average student in the United States who goes to college comes back owing $40,000. I have friends whose kids owe $100,000 or $150,000. Next thing is that we deal with in this country, we're starting to deal with, is paternity leave. How much paternity leave do you get? 1 month, 2 months, come back in 3 maybe. In Denmark, it's 52 weeks. And it's not just the woman. the woman and the man have the ability to share some of those weeks, so the man gets to come home too. The other thing is about preschool care. In the United States, if you have children, most of our parents both have to work in order to afford the housing that they're in. So who's going to raise the children? Who's going to be at home? Well, if you don't have a grandparent and one of the parents isn't staying home, then you have to hire somebody. In our area, they're spending $1,000 to $2,000 a month to have somebody at home. In Denmark, parents pay only 30% of the cost of preschool care. So how do we raise compassionate children? Well, through that course, I've developed a list of best practices. And I'm going to share 5 with you that I'm recommending be adopted in my school district. By the way, they don't have any organized curriculum in my school district on behavioral learning. So one of them is circle time. There's a teacher here in the fourth grade teacher who every morning at 9 a.m. has circle time. Kids sit on the floor, get in the circle. The number one question, the first question of every day, and a kid cannot opt out, is how are you feeling today? I went to school for 20 years. I don't recall anybody ever asking me how I was feeling. They asked me what grade did I get, what score, did we win the ball game, what college did I get into, what job did I get? No one ever asked me about my feeling. And I feel so strongly about the ability of children to sit down and share their feelings with one another, because one, they're going to learn that they share more feelings than not. And you're going to be able to identify the problems. Once it becomes usual and customary to share your feelings and you're not afraid of doing it, you're going to discover where the problems lie. The second thing that I discovered was something called the buddy bench. And that's a bench that's on campus, and you go sit on a bench if you need a friend. My father was in the Air Force. We moved every 3 or 4 years. I had to go to a new school every 3, 4 years. And all I had to do was go sit on a bench to find friends. My life would have been so much easier. The third thing that they're doing in some of these schools that, again, I highly recommend is that they're training kids to be mediators and arbitrators to resolve disputes on campus between kids. Kids going to kids to resolve disputes rather than going to the teacher, going to the parent, or going to the principal. Again, what's going to happen? You're going to have conversations. How did that make you feel? How would you feel if they said this to you? How would you feel? Again, you're eliciting the feelings between the friends. Then the last thing was actually something that came about from a high school student. He organized a group on his campus whose goal it was to make sure that nobody, when they went out to lunch, ate by themselves. We dined together. So they would identify children who were eating alone, make sure that they didn't eat alone. And not only that, they would make sure they mix it up. So the jocks didn't just eat with the jocks, and the drama people and the nerds didn't just congregate by themselves and isolate themselves. So I highly recommend that, particularly for middle school and for high schools. The last thing is not something that I actually recommend that every teacher do, but one teacher wrote this to me. One of the things that teachers, the feedback I get from some of the teachers, we don't have time. Because when you're dealing with behavioral learning, you're dealing oftentimes one-on-one, and there really isn't time to teach both the subject and enough time to spend that much individualized attention to students. So what does a teacher do? She hands out notebooks at the beginning of the year with paper, lined paper, for the children that they can write on. Then she has a mailbox on her desk. So a child is able to write to the teacher, put it in the mailbox, she takes it home at night, and she responds to the child the next day. And she said, yes, I get mail that says, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite ice cream? But I'm also learning a lot about the children. And not only that, they're learning to write better, and they're also learning to form sentences better. They're getting educated in the process. So that really kind of summarizes this work. And I'm really passionate about this work because we do need to become a more compassionate, caring society in the United States. We do. And if we have to start with the kids, because sometimes we're too late with the adults. Adults can't convince of their need to be more giving, but children certainly can. And I feel very passionate about this. And this is something that we can do. You can write me at trustandeducation@gmail.com, or not com. at Gmail, trustandeducation@gmail. I'll send you these lists, and please circulate them to everybody, because every single thing on my best practices list for teachers can be done for free. It doesn't take money. It takes the allocation of time. And this is something we can all participate in and, in my view, need to do. So I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions.
Shags, you're on. All right.
Do I stop sharing?
Go ahead and stop sharing. got cheering for Shags. Thank you, sir. So wonderful, wonderful material. We have a number of questions lined up for you already. I do want to introduce the people on the call though. So, Bud, let's see if we can get the stop share going.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't get my arrow to show.
Not a worry at all.
If I press escape, will that screw it?
No, it's fine.
Oh, here we go. Now I got my arrow.
There we go. Excellent.
All right.
So, introducing on the call, and when you hear me name you, please just wave at the screen. That will work fine. We have a number of international guests going on, and that's fantastic. In Canada, we've got Chris Cochran, who is representing the country well. Well done, sir. In France, we have Ala Hassanen. So a pleasure to have you here, sir. In Zimbabwe, Colin Kuhuni, thank you for being with us today. And I believe we have Marty, Marty in the Bay Area. So Marty is joining us today as well. We'll be hearing from him in an upcoming recording. And then we have members from all manner of places. We have in Atlanta, we have Tanya. In Houston, we have Rory. In British Columbia, we have Nick. In the Bay Area, we have Cecilia and Shags.
Hi, Bud.
And Farheen.
Hi.
And me. All right. And of course, Bud is in the Bay Area as well. So, Bud, we'll start off with a question from Farheen. Farheen, you're up.
Hi, Bud. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was
Right.
truly inspirational. I really love that video of the little girl. Like, I could not stop laughing. She was so cute. So I guess I have two questions. One is a quick question. Do you speak Dari?
No, I don't.
You don't.
I tried to learn it. And 5 years later, I still know how to say hello and goodbye.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've heard it's a very difficult language, so I was just really
Right.
curious. And then my second question is, you hear a lot, like you probably get this a lot, but, people think that Afghanistan is not a safe country. How do you kind of, deal with safety when you're there?
Okay. One, they've always been willing to have guys with guns with me when I go to villages, but I never have them. It's pretty hard to interface with somebody with an AK-47 on either side of you, right? But they make sure that they protect me. I also don't tell them when I'm going to be there, and we don't stay very long. And if they're concerned that there are people that will know that I'm there, then they'll have guns, but they'll be far away. And Afghanistan is not as dangerous as it is portrayed. I mean, part of the problem with the news is we only see the bad news, right? So they're going to report every killing, every terrorist act, everything. So it's not as dangerous, but you do sort of feel that sense of danger because there are guns everywhere. When you land in Kabul and there are guns on the street and they're peering in your windows, they will actually break your windows out of your car if they're tinted. I bought a car for the program director over there and had tinted windows. We had to go by a place and they stopped us and they were going to bust our windows out, but we begged and pleaded, but we had to change out the windows.
Fascinating. Yeah, wow. But I mean, as long as, like, I guess, like people who want to volunteer, do they,
Right.
of course, right, safety is one of the concerns, but, for the most part, you've never kind of felt too much, right?
Well, no, I mean, once you're sort of there and you get used to sort of guys in the streets with guns, and most of those people aren't out there killing everybody, but there is the risk of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. To me, that's a risk that's I'm prepared to assume.
I mean,
The
it
bigger
happens
risk
in the Bay
for
Area
me-
too, right?
The bigger risk for me is kidnapping.
Oh, interesting.
They think there's lots of money here.
I see.
So that's why I am much more guarded, and I don't go out to restaurants. I eat in a hotel, and I actually stopped eating in a hotel because they have lousy food. But the only thing that's really good is breakfast. So I really load up on breakfast.
Well, it sounds like you're getting nourishment from the experiences, right? So good
I
stuff
lose
here.
weight. It's a great place to go to lose weight.
Fair enough. So
Thank
next
you so
question
much.
is from Cecilia.
Yes, Bud. So this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Is there really reliable electricity in those villages where you have computer libraries?
Well, most of our libraries are in and around Kabul. It's also unreliable. I mean, they are actually used to not having electricity for a day. We bought some tablets. I bought some tablets. You can charge them up so that on the days when they don't have any electricity, they can actually use the tablets for a period of time. And I may be buying some more because they were having several days during the winter where they didn't have any electricity. But we still have books. We have books there too. We have books for them to take home.
Good, good. I asked because I just returned I'm a evacuated Peace Corps volunteer. And in my village, we often don't have electricity for 2 weeks. And then when you have it, you get power surges. So people, if they're not careful, their laptop batteries get blown up and all of that. I mean, the first thing I did was to buy a voltage regulator to help prevent that. But the average person cannot afford that there. So I was just curious if maybe there was something going on that I could benefit from knowing, because I'm going back to my community there and have a goal to get reliable electricity installed in the entire community.
The only other way to do that is generators. And then it becomes who's going to keep them repaired and who's going to pay for the gas. Yeah.
Generators are not an option in my...
Oh, aren't they?
Well, they're there and the gas is there, but it's just not a sustainable way of doing things. The minute I would be gone and the money for the gas runs out, those generators would not be working. So I'm actually working on trying to do a mini grid in the community, which is big undertaking, but I will somehow succeed.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Excellent. Marty, you have a question. And let's unmute you.
Where's Marty? Oh, there he is.
Yeah. And Marty,
unmute yourself.
Okay, Marty, go ahead with your question. I've got you unmuted.
Do they have internet service in your villages?
They do, they just can't afford it.
Okay. And the second question is, do you know about Rachel?
Most of the families can't afford it.
Do you know about Rachel? Rachel?
Pardon me?
Rachel.
What
you know about
Marty,
Rachel?
describe
remote,
what Rachel is.
Remote access community hotspot for education and learning. It's a San Diego-based firm that was started by Cisco engineers in the 90s in Africa. And I go to Guatemala for ophthalmology, but I've just started supplying a dozen schools there with these $500 devices that are a hotspot and a hard drive. The hard drive is loaded with government textbooks electronically, Khan Academy, and other things. You can broadcast to 150 laptops or computers for several hundred feet, and they're running in schools that don't have, they have electricity, but they don't have internet connection, basically. They're elementary or junior high school.
Marty, would you do me a favor and send me an email at trustededucation@gmail.com?
Yeah, I got your email.
Tell me about that.
Be happy to.
Great.
So, and if Marty, if World Possible is the organization, I think Farheen just got a link. I found the same one myself. So
Mundo Posible, World Possible is the international company that has over 40 countries involved, including some U.S. correctional institutes.
Yeah.
And then in Guatemala, where I go, they have a variant called Mundo Posible with 4 people who work for them there, who install mainly through Rotary grants, global grants, although I'm not working with a grant, several hundred schools with these systems.
Right. I definitely would like to learn about that.
All right. We'll make sure you guys are connected. I want to see if we can get another question or two in. Colin, I know you had a question, so I'm going to unmute you. And what question do you have?
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm very curious, but if you can answer my question about the relevance of the use of the word narcissism in your topic. I thought lawyers are not narcissists.
Narcissistic?
Yes.
But in your experience, are lawyers narcissistic here?
There are a lot of people who are narcissistic.
No, I'm actually one, and I actually wanted to defend the good name and reputation of lawyers. You did talk about mediation. I was so touched, or in fact, very impressed with the circle that you trained children to have in those schools. But how do you train the kids to do mediation and conciliation? Do you
Right.
have do you train some of them so that they become the peers to assist the others in that kind of thing?
Yes, yes. I actually attended a classroom that had about 40 children in it of different grades, and they were all being
Okay.
trained as mediators. So
Wow.
when, you know, when they're at break and they're out at lunch break or recess or whatever, and a problem arises, they head to the mediators.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'm impressed.
No, and they
Thanks
do
so
that
much.
also in Greenland. I was in Greenland. They have designated people that the students elect to be the mediators.
Okay.
And they choose them every 2 or 3 months, so they change. But the students themselves decide who their mediators are going to be.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Fantastic program.
Yeah, cool.
Great
Thank you.
question, Colin. Thank you very much. So we're running out of time, so let me wind things down, and then I'll hand it over to Bud for a final word. All of you who are participating in the recording this morning, we'll keep talking to Bud as long as he's willing, so so feel free to stick around. But if you are joining us for our meeting this week, and this is this week's meeting, the program for this week's meeting, you know, we're so happy to have you here. You know, thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you're finding all sorts of reasons to be inspired by the content that we share, and that
Yeah.
you'll do two things for us. First, let us know you were here. There is an attendance kind of piece there, and there's a little form. And if you type in your address correctly, then you'll get an email that you can use to share with your club secretary if you're a Rotarian looking to make up a missed meeting from, you know, from the last few weeks or something like that. Additionally, there is the discuss section at the bottom. Let us know what you think of this program, of the entire meeting, of the thoughts that other people share in that section. We love getting different thoughts from people as they encounter what we're trying to do to share stories of inspiration with the world. We always like to leave the last thought to our speaker. And so, Bud, I will hand it back to you for a final word.
All right. First, I want to say, if any of you want to get the newsletter that I send out periodically about what's going on in Afghanistan, just send me an email and I'll add you to it. There's some good news in there for a change.
Wow.
But I want to say this, I'm 74 years old, and looking back, I might be older than anybody here. Am I?
No, no.
I think might be was the key piece there. So keep going on that thought.
All right,
You
so
would be
there's one message in particular I'm repeating over and over and over again that I wish I would have learned earlier in life, is that the greatest rewards in life will come from the impact you have on the lives of others. Period.
Well said. Everyone, we will see you next week.